The hum of bustling travellers filled JFK Airport on a crisp autumn morning. The air buzzed with announcements, hurried footsteps, and the aroma of coffee. Olivia Richardson moved through the terminal with understated grace. Her tailored navy blazer and pencil skirt marked her as a professional accustomed to navigating such spaces. She carried a sleek leather bag and a neatly folded boarding pass. At the check-in counter, the agent scanned her ticket. "Miss Richardson," the agent said, "you've been upgraded to first class. Enjoy your flight." Olivia responded with a polite smile and a quiet, "Thank you." Her tone was as composed as her posture as she turned toward security. She felt the faint flicker of surprise in the agent's voice. It wasn't new. This subtle undercurrent of disbelief often came from strangers who didn't expect her to belong. After years of navigating these moments, she had learned to let them pass. Her father's voice often rang in her mind, "Never let them see they've gotten to you." The security line moved slowly, giving Olivia a moment to let her thoughts drift. Her destination, San Francisco, wasn't just another business trip. It was a pivotal moment for her company. The deal she was set to finalize could define its future. She had spent weeks preparing. Still, her calm exterior belied the lingering tension that often accompanied her in spaces like this. She had grown adept at reading the subtle shifts in body language, the side glances, the raised eyebrows, the stolen looks that questioned her presence. Clearing security, she recalled a moment from years ago. Fresh out of graduate school, she had walked into her first corporate boardroom filled with men decades her senior. Their skepticism had been palpable. One man's whisper had cut through the air like a knife. Who let her in? Those words had stung, but they had also fueled her resolve. Her father's advice, always grounded in strength, had guided her even then. Rise above it. Let your work speak louder than their doubts. Stepping onto the jet bridge, the cool air brushed against her face. The first-class cabin gleamed with polished wood accents, leather seats and crisp white linens. Olivia moved to her seat with practiced efficiency, placing her carry-on in the overhead compartment and settling into the window seat. She adjusted her blazer and retrieved her tablet, determined to review her notes before takeoff. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted subtly as passengers trickled in. Olivia could feel the weight of curious glances, some fleeting, others lingering. She had experienced this before, the unspoken question in their eyes, the quiet assumptions that had nothing to do with her accomplishments and everything to do with the color of her skin. She met their gazes with the same calm confidence she had mastered, refusing to let their discomfort seep into her own. Rebecca Whitmore, the lead flight attendant, moved through the cabin with polished precision. Her blonde hair was swept into a neat bun, and her uniform was impeccable. As she passed Olivia, her gaze lingered a second too long, her blue eyes narrowing slightly before she turned away. Olivia caught the look but chose to ignore it, turning her attention back to her tablet. The engines roared to life, signaling the final boarding call. Olivia leaned back in her seat, letting the hum of the cabin fade into the background as she focused on the upcoming meeting. Minutes later, she sensed movement nearby and glanced up to see Rebecca standing at her row. The hum of the engines filled the first-class cabin as the plane taxied to the runway. The leather seats gleamed, the air faintly scented with coffee. Passengers settled in, adjusting headphones, flipping through magazines. Olivia, outwardly composed, felt the tension brewing beneath the surface. Rebecca Whitmore reappeared, her posture authoritative. "Ma'am," she began, her tone sharper now, "I'll need to see your ticket again." Olivia turned, meeting Rebecca's gaze. "You've already checked it," she replied calmly. Rebecca's smile was thin. "I just want to confirm everything is in order." Her words carried an edge. The hum of conversations faded as passengers noticed the interaction. Olivia felt their eyes on her. She slipped the boarding pass from her blazer and handed it over. Rebecca took it, scanning the document longer than necessary. "It looks fine," she finally said, though her tone suggested otherwise. She handed the pass back, her fingers brushing against Olivia's briefly. She lingered a moment longer before stepping away. Olivia's grip on the boarding pass tightened. "Don't let them make you react on their terms. Stay calm, always." She straightened her blazer and returned her focus to her tablet, though the tension was undeniable. Minutes passed, the plane ascending smoothly. The incident gnawed at Olivia. Her experience had prepared her for moments like this, yet each occurrence felt like a fresh reminder of the barriers she faced. She had always known her success wouldn't shield her from prejudice, it only seemed to amplify it. As the flight settled into cruising altitude, Rebecca returned with a tray of beverages, offering drinks to the passengers ahead of Olivia. When she reached Olivia, her movements slowed, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Would you like something to drink, ma'am?" "Just water, thank you," Olivia replied evenly. Rebecca nodded and poured a glass, her hands steady, but her demeanor still tinged with something Olivia couldn't quite name. As Rebecca placed the glass on Olivia's tray table, her voice lowered. "You know," she said, her words clipped and deliberate, "we usually don't have issues like this in first class." Olivia's eyes flicked up, meeting Rebecca's with a steadiness that could have cut glass. "Issues like what?" she asked, her tone calm, but pointed. Rebecca hesitated, her mouth opening as though to reply, but she seemed to think better of it. Without another word, she moved on to the next passenger, leaving Olivia with a bitter taste. Across the aisle, a man in a tailored suit, Jason Chen, adjusted his glasses and leaned toward Olivia. "That didn't seem right," he murmured. Olivia offered a faint smile. "I've seen worse," she replied softly. Rebecca, meanwhile, hovered at the edge of the cabin, her gaze flicking back to Olivia. The first-class cabin seemed smaller now, the tension curling in the air. Olivia could feel the weight of unspoken judgments. She straightened in her seat, her resolve firm. She wasn't about to let a flight attendant or anyone else diminish her right to be where she was. As Olivia returned to her tablet, composing an email, her phone buzzed softly. It was from her father, Marcus Richardson. "Let me know if you need anything. Always here." Olivia tucked the phone away, her expression softening briefly. She knew she wouldn't need to involve her father, at least not yet. This was her battle. Rebecca's presence loomed once more, her voice sharper. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you in private," she said, gesturing toward the aisle. The murmurs in the cabin grew louder. Olivia set her tablet aside and rose gracefully, her movements deliberate. She followed Rebecca down the aisle, her posture erect. When they stopped near the galley, Rebecca turned, arms crossed. "I'm going to need to verify your ticket again," she said, her tone devoid of politeness. Olivia tilted her head slightly. "You've already verified it twice," she said, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of steel. "What exactly are you looking for?" Rebecca's face flushed faintly. "It's just procedure," she replied, her hesitation betraying her uncertainty. Olivia held Rebecca's gaze before producing the ticket once more. She handed it over without a word. Rebecca glanced at it briefly, then handed it back, her movements jerky now, her confidence visibly shaken. As Olivia returned to her seat, she caught Jason's eye. He offered a small nod, and she responded with the faintest tilt of her head. Around her, the cabin had grown quieter, the unspoken tension pressing down. Olivia knew this wasn't the end, but she was ready. The airplane leveled off, and the hum of cruising altitude filled the cabin. The fasten seatbelt sign dimmed. Olivia glanced down at her tablet, the notes for her upcoming presentation precise and detailed. She tried to focus, but the lingering tension refused to dissipate. Rebecca walked through the aisle, her steps measured, her posture crisp. Her gaze frequently flicked back to Olivia, her eyes narrowing. The unease in the cabin had become palpable. Olivia sat upright, her demeanor calm. She caught sight of Rebecca lingering near the galley, exchanging hushed words with a younger flight attendant. Though their conversation was inaudible, Olivia could sense the subtle glances being thrown in her direction. The weight of those stares pressed down on her. A soft murmur from the aisle interrupted her thoughts. Jason leaned toward her. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. "I'm offering a faint but polite smile. It's nothing I haven't handled before," she replied, her tone measured. She appreciated his concern, but wasn't inclined to draw more attention than necessary. Jason nodded, retreating slightly, though his expression lingered with a mix of unease and quiet support. Across the aisle, Rebecca reappeared, a tray balanced expertly in her hands. She moved between passengers, offering beverages. When she reached Olivia's row, her movement slowed. She placed a glass of water on Olivia's tray table with a deliberate, almost hesitant motion. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am," she said, her voice polite but with a subtle edge. "Thank you," Olivia responded evenly, her gaze meeting Rebecca's. There was no malice in Olivia's tone, only the kind of calm professionalism that had served her well. Rebecca's lips pressed into a tight line before she stepped away, the tension between them unspoken yet undeniable. As Rebecca continued down the aisle, Olivia's phone buzzed. It was a message from her father, Marcus Richardson. "Let me know if you need me. Always here." Olivia allowed herself a brief moment of warmth. Marcus had always been her anchor. She wasn't ready to involve him yet. This was her battle. The quiet was soon interrupted by the sharp ring of a phone in the galley. Rebecca hurried to answer it, her expression shifting. Though Olivia couldn't make out the words, Rebecca's tone carried a hint of unease. When she returned to the cabin, her posture was stiffer, her movements less assured. Passengers near Olivia began to take notice. A woman 2 rows ahead turned, her brows furrowed in curiosity. Across the aisle, Jason exchanged a glance with Olivia, his expression a silent acknowledgement. The cabin, once a place of luxury, now felt charged with tension. Rebecca approached Olivia again, this time without the pretense of a tray. "Ma'am," she said, her voice sharper, "I'll need to verify your ticket again." Olivia looked up, her expression calm but firm. "You've already verified it twice," she said, her voice steady. "It's just procedure," Rebecca insisted, her hesitation betraying the excuse. The words hung in the air, drawing murmurs from nearby passengers. The cabin was no longer a space of quiet indulgence, but a stage. Olivia straightened. "If it's procedure," she said, her tone carrying steel, "then I trust you'll follow it with everyone else as well." A few passengers exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of surprise and approval. Rebecca's face flushed, her professional demeanour slipping. She hesitated, then turned sharply and walked away. Jason leaned toward Olivia. "That was handled remarkably well," he said, admiration in his tone. "Thank you," Olivia replied softly. She returned her focus to her tablet, though she could feel the gazes of others. The quiet hum of the cabin seemed different now, charged with an unspoken understanding. Olivia knew the battle wasn't over, but for now she had reclaimed the space that was rightfully hers. As the plane continued its journey, the tension refused to dissipate. Rebecca's presence, though momentarily absent, loomed large. Olivia knew this wasn't over. The quiet hum of Marcus Richardson's office in Dallas was a stark contrast to the storm brewing at 30,000 feet. The sleek space reflected the man himself, modern, efficient, and understated. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in natural light. Marcus sat at his desk, his attention divided between data on his tablet and the muted voices of his executive team gathered for a meeting. The airline had been riding a wave of success, but Marcus knew better than to rest on laurels. Headlines from recent weeks had cast a long shadow over the industry. Accusations of racial discrimination, viral videos of passenger mistreatment, and mounting public pressure for reform. He had seen it all before. But each new incident reminded him of the steep climb toward building an airline that prioritized dignity and inclusion. As the meeting continued, Marcus's phone vibrated. He glanced down, his brow furrowing slightly at the familiar name on the screen, Olivia. He picked up the device, his finger hovering for a moment before unlocking the message. Her words were few, but enough to sharpen his focus. On board situation escalating. We'll keep you updated. Marcus set the phone down carefully, his expression betraying no hint of the concern tightening in his chest. His daughter rarely reached out during business travels, unless something significant was unfolding. He knew Olivia well, her poise, her independence, her determination to handle challenges on her own. If she was reaching out now, it meant the situation had already crossed the line. "Gentlemen," Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but decisive. "Let's pause here. I'll review the final points later." The executives exchanged quick glances before nodding. As the team dispersed, Marcus stood and walked toward the windows, his hands clasped behind his back. His mind turned to Olivia. From the moment she was old enough to understand the world, he had worked to prepare her for the unique challenges she would face. Marcus had seen firsthand how bias could manifest, often subtle but no less corrosive. His rise from pilot to CEO had not been without its battles, and he had passed those lessons on to his daughter. "You'll face obstacles," he had told her many times, "but remember, you're stronger than they are." As he stared out over the city, his phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Olivia. It was a notification, a short alert from the airline's internal monitoring system, flagging a developing situation on board a flight to San Francisco. Marcus's jaw tightened as he read the brief report. A passenger complaint, escalating tension in first class, and, most troubling, a potential issue involving one of the airline's senior crew members. Without hesitation, Marcus tapped his phone and issued a directive to his assistant. "Have the operations team connect me to Flight 273's crew immediately," he said, "and pull the passenger manifest." Minutes later, Marcus was seated at his desk, a tablet in front of him displaying the manifest. His eyes scanned the list of names quickly, halting when he saw hers. Olivia Richardson, first class, seat 3A. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. The concern that had simmered beneath the surface now crystallized into resolve. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of his assistant, Emma, a sharp-eyed woman who had worked alongside Marcus for years. "The connection to Flight 273 is ready, sir," she said, "and we've retrieved initial video footage from social media. It's already making the rounds." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing, motioning for her to proceed. On the screen before him, grainy footage played. A woman standing stiffly beside a seated passenger, her arms crossed in a gesture of authority. Marcus recognized the lead flight attendant's name from the report, Rebecca Whitmore. A clipped tone carried through the video as she demanded the passenger confirm their seat assignment. The passenger's face wasn't visible, but Marcus didn't need to see it. He already knew. Emma cleared her throat softly, drawing his attention. "Shall I prepare a statement for the press?" she asked. "Not yet," Marcus replied, his voice measured. "We handle this in-house first." His eyes remained fixed on the screen, his expression unreadable. "I want to speak with the captain of that flight and get a first-hand account, and inform the regional director I'll be at the airport when the plane lands." Emma nodded, her movements brisk as she left to carry out his instructions. Alone again, Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped under his chin. He had built his career on navigating crises, but this one was personal. It wasn't just his airline's reputation on the line, it was his daughter's dignity. As he prepared to leave, Marcus allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had spent years advocating for change within the airline industry, pushing for diversity training and fair treatment policies. Yet moments like these reminded him how much work still lay ahead. He wasn't just fighting for his passengers or his employees, he was fighting for the future Olivia deserved. When he stepped out of his office, the resolve in his stride was unmistakable. The waiting car outside the headquarters would take him directly to the airport, where he intended to meet Flight 273 himself. As he descended the building's sleek marble staircase, Marcus's thoughts were singular. He wouldn't just oversee this situation. He would take control of it, for Olivia and for everything they had both worked so hard to achieve. The sleek black car pulled up to the private terminal of the San Francisco airport, its engine humming softly. Marcus Richardson stepped out with deliberate composure, his dark suit impeccably tailored. The evening air carried a faint chill, but Marcus barely noticed. His focus was singular. Flight 273. The private terminal buzzed with activity. Marcus's presence drew quiet nods of acknowledgement from employees. A uniformed airline operations manager hurried to meet him. "Mr. Richardson," the manager began, his voice a mixture of deference and urgency, "we've been monitoring the situation. The flight is on approach and should be on the ground in 10 minutes. We've alerted the ground crew." Marcus nodded. "Has the captain been briefed?" "Yes, sir," the manager replied. "Captain Wilson is aware of your arrival and the nature of the concern. He'll meet you once the passengers disembark." "Good," Marcus said. "And the lead flight attendant, Rebecca Whitmore, she's still on board?" "Yes, sir," the manager confirmed, shifting slightly under Marcus's unwavering gaze. "Keep it that way," Marcus instructed. "No one speaks to her until I do." As the manager nodded and stepped away, Marcus glanced toward the airfield. The glow of the runway lights stretched into the distance. The low roar of engines grew louder as Flight 273 descended, its landing gear unfolding smoothly. Marcus stood near the terminal's glass windows, his reflection faint against the backdrop of the approaching plane. It touched down with practiced ease. Inside the cabin, Olivia remained seated, her calm exterior unshaken. Rebecca hovered a few rows ahead, her demeanor taut and strained. The murmurs among passengers had grown quieter. Jason offered Olivia a brief nod of solidarity. As the plane taxied toward the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco International Airport. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off. Thank you for flying with us." As the plane came to a halt, the cabin lights brightened. Passengers began reaching for their belongings. Rebecca stood near the front, her posture rigid. The weight of what had unfolded seemed to press down on her. The door to the cabin opened, and a uniformed ground agent stepped on board. Her eyes flicked toward Rebecca before she spoke quietly to the captain. Moments later, she gestured for the passengers to begin disembarking. Olivia stayed in her seat, waiting. She could feel the weight of Rebecca's presence nearby. When the last passenger had stepped off, Olivia stood gathering her belongings. Rebecca's voice broke the silence. "Ma'am," she said, her tone carefully measured, "I hope your flight was satisfactory." Olivia turned to face her, her expression calm but unyielding. "It was enlightening," she replied, her words carrying an undertone. Without another word, she stepped past Rebecca, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she exited the cabin. As Olivia walked into the terminal, her eyes immediately found her father. Marcus stood a few feet from the gate, his presence commanding but calm. For a brief moment, the strain of the flight seemed to lift. As their eyes met, Marcus extended a hand. Olivia grasped it firmly, her composure softening just enough to reveal the quiet relief beneath. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked, his voice low but steady. "I'm fine," Olivia replied, her tone equally composed. "But you're not here to check on me, are you?" Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. "Not entirely." Olivia nodded, understanding. "You'll handle it." "I always do," Marcus said, his tone firm but warm. As Olivia stepped aside, Marcus turned toward the gate where the operations manager was waiting with Rebecca. The flight attendant's usual poise had given way to unease. Her arms were crossed tightly as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, then quickly away. "Miss Whitmore," Marcus began, his voice even but authoritative, "I believe we need to have a conversation." Rebecca opened her mouth as if to respond, but hesitated, her confidence faltering. The operations manager gestured toward a private conference room nearby, and Marcus motioned for Rebecca to follow. As they moved toward the room, Olivia watched from a distance, her expression resolute. The terminal grew quieter. The conference room door closed behind them. The confrontation was inevitable, but for Olivia the most important battle had already been fought and won. She had stood her ground, faced prejudice head-on, and emerged unshaken. Now it was her father's turn. The soft click of the conference room door signaled the beginning of a reckoning. Outside, the terminal bustled, unaware of the storm brewing within. Olivia's phone vibrated persistently with notifications. Videos from Flight 273 had begun to circulate, snippets of Rebecca's curt tone and dismissive body language sparking outrage. The hashtags were already trending. Fly fair, equal treatment now, stand with Olivia. Olivia glanced at her screen, her brow furrowing as she skimmed the comments. Most were supportive, but a few questioned whether the situation was being blown out of proportion. She exhaled slowly. She had spent years navigating moments like this. Nearby, Jason approached. "It's spreading quickly," he said, gesturing to his phone. "I saw at least 3 major accounts reposting the video already." Olivia nodded. "That's not surprising. People are hungry for stories like this. It's about more than just me. It's about what this represents." Jason hesitated. "If you don't mind me asking, is this something you're used to handling?" A faint smile touched Olivia's lips. "Let's just say I've had practice, but it helps to have allies." She glanced at him meaningfully. Before Jason could respond, a nearby monitor flickered. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom. "Passenger incident on Flight 273 sparks social media outrage. Airline CEO arrives to address situation." The accompanying footage showed Marcus stepping into the terminal, his expression calm but resolute. The media had wasted no time. Inside the conference room, Marcus sat across from Rebecca, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. The operations manager stood by the door. "Miss Whitmore," Marcus began, his tone measured, "I'd like to hear your account of what transpired on Flight 273. Rebecca hesitated, her gaze darting to the manager before returning to Marcus. I was following procedure," she said, her voice faltering. The passenger in question was acting in a way that warranted closer attention. "And by closer attention," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly, "you mean asking her to verify her ticket multiple times, despite having no evidence to suggest there was an issue?" Rebecca's face flushed. "I was ensuring the integrity of the first-class cabin," she replied defensively. "It's part of my job to." "It's part of your job," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "to provide exemplary service to all passengers without prejudice or assumption. Would you agree?" Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but was at a loss for words. Marcus let the silence linger. "Miss Whitmore, our airline prides itself on setting the standard for inclusion and respect. What occurred on that flight does not align with those values. Whether your actions were intentional or the result of unconscious bias, the impact remains the same. You failed to uphold our principles, and that failure reflects on this company." Rebecca's shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to cause harm," she said quietly. "Intent is important," Marcus acknowledged, his tone softening slightly, "but so is accountability. And right now, the world is watching." As Marcus stood, the operations manager stepped forward, signaling the end of the meeting. Rebecca remained seated, her expression a mixture of regret and uncertainty. Marcus paused before exiting, turning back to her. "I believe in second chances, Miss Whitmore," he said, "but they are earned, not given. Reflect on that." When Marcus emerged from the conference room, Olivia was waiting. Their eyes met, and she could see the faint lines of exhaustion etched into his features. He crossed the distance between them. "It's handled," he said simply, his voice steady. "Thank you," Olivia said, her tone carrying more meaning than the words themselves. The sound of clicking cameras interrupted their exchange. A cluster of reporters gathered at the terminal's edge, their microphones poised. Marcus straightened, his demeanor shifting into that of the CEO. As he stepped toward the press, the questions came in a torrent. "Mr. Richardson, can you comment on the incident aboard Flight 273? How will the airline address allegations of discrimination? Is the lead flight attendant still employed with the company?" Marcus raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "What occurred on Flight 273 is unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our airline," he began, his voice carrying over the clamor. "We are conducting a thorough investigation and taking immediate steps to ensure accountability. This includes mandatory training for all staff on unconscious bias and diversity. Our commitment to providing an inclusive and respectful environment for all passengers remains unwavering." His statement was brief, but powerful. As the reporters continued shouting questions, Marcus stepped back, signaling the end of the impromptu press conference. He returned to Olivia's side, his expression resolute. The media storm would continue, but Marcus knew they had taken the first step. For Olivia, for the airline, and for everyone watching, this was about more than damage control. It was about setting a new standard. The conference room at the airline's Dallas headquarters was stark and imposing. The long, polished table reflected the dim overhead lights. The walls, adorned with photographs of the company's milestones, stood as silent witnesses. Seated at one end of the table, Rebecca Whitmore felt the weight of the room pressing down on her. The members of the disciplinary board, their faces impassive, shuffled papers. The tension was palpable. Rebecca adjusted the collar of her uniform, her fingers trembling slightly. This wasn't the confident lead flight attendant who once commanded first-class cabins. The woman sitting here today was unsure, vulnerable, and acutely aware of the precariousness of her position. "Miss Whitmore," one of the board members began, his voice even, "we are here to review the events aboard Flight 273. Do you understand the gravity of this hearing?" Rebecca nodded. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice catching. The board wasted no time. A video clip played on the large monitor, the familiar footage of Rebecca standing stiffly beside Olivia, her posture rigid, her tone clipped. The audio captured every sharp word and dismissive glance. "Can you explain your actions in this video?" another board member asked, her tone professional but edged with scrutiny. Rebecca hesitated. "I was following protocol," she began, the words sounding hollow. You thought what?" the woman interrupted, her gaze unrelenting. "What specific behavior from the passenger led you to question her legitimacy in first class?" Rebecca faltered. "I misjudged the situation," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. As the board members exchanged glances, Rebecca felt a pang of shame. Her confidence, once her shield, now seemed like an empty shell. The silence stretched. "Misjudgments have consequences, Miss Whitmore," Marcus Richardson said, leaning forward. "Consequences not just for the individuals involved, but for the integrity of this airline." Rebecca's eyes darted to Marcus. She had expected him to be here, but hearing his words cut deeper. She lowered her gaze. Maria Rodriguez took the seat across from Rebecca, her hands clasped tightly. Maria recounted the discomfort she had felt during the flight. "It was clear to me," Maria said softly, "that Ms. Richardson wasn't being treated fairly. It didn't feel right." Jason Chen appeared next, his demeanor calm but resolute. "I saw how she was singled out," he said plainly. "It wasn't just unprofessional, it was unnecessary." Each testimony chipped away at Rebecca's defenses. By the time Olivia entered the room, the air had grown heavier. Olivia's heels clicked softly as she approached the table. Unlike the others, she didn't sit. Instead, she stood, her posture poised and commanding. "When I boarded Flight 273, Olivia began, her voice steady, I expected the professionalism and courtesy that this airline is known for. What I experienced instead was something I've faced too many times before: assumptions, prejudice, and the quiet erosion of dignity." Rebecca flinched. "But this isn't just about me," Olivia continued. "It's about the passengers who deserve better, the employees who are held to a higher standard, and the values this airline claims to uphold." She turned to address the board directly. "Accountability is essential, but so is growth. We can't change what's happened, but we can choose how we respond. I believe Miss Whitmore has the capacity to learn from this and to be part of the change we need." The room fell silent. Rebecca looked up, her eyes meeting Olivia's. She saw no malice, no triumph, only conviction. When the board called on Rebecca to speak, her voice trembled, but carried an honesty she hadn't found before. "I was wrong," she said, her gaze shifting between Olivia and the board. "I let my biases cloud my judgment, and I failed to treat Miss Richardson with the respect she deserves. For that, I am truly sorry." The sincerity in her voice was undeniable. Marcus exchanged a brief glance with Olivia before addressing Rebecca. "Acknowledging a mistake is the first step," he said. "The real work begins now." The board deliberated briefly. Rebecca would retain her position, but under strict probation, contingent on her participation in an intensive diversity and inclusion training program. As the meeting adjourned, Rebecca approached Olivia hesitantly. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion, "for what you said in there." Olivia studied her for a moment. "Words only matter if they lead to action," she replied. "I hope you prove me right." Rebecca nodded, her resolve firming. As Marcus and Olivia walked down the hallway, he glanced at his daughter. "You handled that well," he said, pride in his voice. "So did you," Olivia replied, her lips curving into a small smile. They stepped outside into the fading light. The atmosphere of the airline's Dallas headquarters buzzed with a sense of purpose. It was a turning point. The large training hall, typically used for corporate meetings, had been transformed. Rows of chairs faced a stage where a banner declared, "Inclusion in Flight, leading the change together." Rebecca sat near the back, her hands clasped tightly. She had arrived early, not out of eagerness, but to gather her thoughts. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. Her gaze wandered across the room. Employees from all levels of the company had gathered. The diversity in the room was a testament to the airline's commitment. Near the front she spotted Olivia, poised, serene, yet undeniably influential in her presence. Marcus stood first, stepping onto the stage with his signature poise. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for our airline," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "We've long prided ourselves on being a leader in this industry, but leadership means more than operational excellence. It means creating an environment where everyone, passengers and employees alike, feels respected, valued, and seen." The audience listened intently as Marcus outlined the comprehensive reforms being implemented. Every employee would undergo diversity training, from frontline staff to executives. Hiring practices would be reviewed to ensure equity. New channels for reporting discrimination would be established. His words weren't just promises, they were a blueprint for systemic change. When Marcus concluded, the room erupted into applause. Rebecca clapped hesitantly, unsure if she had earned the right to celebrate. Her hesitation didn't go unnoticed. Olivia rose and approached the stage, her movements deliberate. "Change isn't easy," she began, her voice calm but resonant. "It requires us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the systems we're a part of. But discomfort is where growth begins." Her eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on Rebecca. "I stand here today not just as someone who experienced bias firsthand, but as someone who believes in the possibility of transformation. That's why I'm proud to join my father and this company in building a culture where dignity and respect are not optional, they're foundational. Rebecca felt a lump rise in her throat. Olivia's words felt personal, a challenge and an invitation. As the applause subsided, Marcus returned to the stage. Before we move forward, we'd like to invite someone to share their journey, someone who has taken the first steps toward growth and accountability. Rebecca's heart sank. A quiet murmur rippled through the audience. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but something in Olivia's steady gaze gave her courage. Her footsteps felt heavy as she walked to the stage. "I'll be honest," she began, her voice trembling. "Standing here is one of the hardest things I've ever done." She paused, scanning the room. "I've spent the past few weeks confronting parts of myself I didn't want to see. I've had to face the reality that my actions, whether intentional or not, caused harm, and for that I am deeply sorry." Rebecca's voice steadied. "But what I've learned is that an apology is just the beginning. It's what you do afterward that matters. That's why I'm here. Not just to take responsibility, but to be part of the change. I've started mentoring junior staff, listening to their experiences and committing to doing better every single day." She turned slightly, her eyes meeting Olivia's. "I owe a special thanks to Ms. Richardson. Your grace and your words gave me a chance to see a better version of myself. I won't waste that chance." When she stepped down, the applause was hesitant at first, then grew louder. Rebecca returned to her seat, her heart pounding. The event concluded with the unveiling of a new training initiative spearheaded by Olivia and Marcus, the program Diversity in Action. As the audience dispersed, Marcus and Olivia stood near the stage. "She did well," Olivia said quietly, her eyes following Rebecca. "She's on the right path," Marcus replied, "but the journey is just beginning." Olivia nodded. "So is ours." As the room emptied, a sense of optimism lingered. The expansive corporate hall was unrecognizable. Rows of chairs filled the space, facing a brightly lit stage adorned with a banner, "The Road to Reconciliation, Building Together." Employees, stakeholders, and media representatives milled about. Olivia glanced at the crowd, noting the mix of uniforms and business attire. It was a moment for reflection and celebrating progress. As a visual testament to the airline's commitment to unity. For Olivia, this event wasn't just a milestone, it was personal. "Ready for this?" A voice pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Rebecca Whitmore, her expression a blend of nervousness and resolve. The transformation in Rebecca was evident, not just in her demeanor, but in her actions. She had thrown herself into the company's inclusion program, mentoring junior staff and engaging in difficult conversations. Today she was about to step into the spotlight. "As ready as I'll ever be," Rebecca said, adjusting her blazer, "but I won't lie, it's daunting." Olivia gave her a small smile. "That means you're taking it seriously, and that's what matters." Rebecca hesitated. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "You didn't have to give me this chance." Olivia nodded. "You earned it, Rebecca. Now go show them why." As the lights dimmed, Rebecca moved to her seat. Marcus stepped onto the platform. His presence commanded attention. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice resonant. "Today we come together not to pat ourselves on the back, but to acknowledge where we've been, where we are, and where we're going." He paused. "Inclusion isn't a buzzword. It's a commitment, a responsibility we all share. And while we've made progress, there's still work to be done." Marcus shared stories from employees, highlighting the impact of the company's reforms. He also acknowledged remaining challenges. His words set the tone, hopeful yet grounded. When he introduced Rebecca, there was a murmur of interest. Some still remembered her from the incident on Flight 273. As Rebecca took the stage, she felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. She gripped the podium, taking a steadying breath. "Standing here today is something I never imagined," she began, her voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. I'm not proud of the actions that brought me here. I made mistakes, mistakes that hurt others and betrayed the values I thought I stood for." She paused, her eyes briefly meeting Olivia's. "But mistakes are also opportunities. Opportunities to learn, to grow, and to do better. And that's what I've been striving for every day since." She shared her journey candidly, from the shame she felt to the lessons she learned. Her voice cracked as she recounted moments of self-reflection, but she pressed on. "I want to thank Miss Richardson," she said, gesturing toward Olivia. "Your grace gave me a chance to see myself clearly. I hope to repay that by being part of the change this company is building." The applause that followed was warm and genuine. Rebecca left the stage, her head held higher. Next, Olivia returned to the stage. "What Rebecca shared is a reminder that change starts with individuals," she said, "but doesn't end there. We're here today because we believe in something bigger, a culture that lifts everyone up, that challenges us to be better." She announced new initiatives. "This isn't just about us," Olivia concluded. "It's about leading by example." As the event drew to a close, Marcus returned to the stage. "Today I'm proud to share our next step, a collaborative industry initiative to create a standardized framework for inclusion across airlines. We'll be inviting other companies to join us." The room erupted in applause. Marcus and Olivia stood near the stage, observing the crowd. "She did well," Marcus said. "She's proving that change is possible," Olivia replied. "But we all have to keep proving it." As the hall began to empty, Olivia felt a quiet satisfaction settle over her. The road to reconciliation was far from over, but they were walking it together, step by step. The early morning light streamed through the windows of the airline's headquarters, painting the conference room in shades of gold. Olivia stood near the edge of the room, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. The city below was waking up, but for Olivia, the day had already begun. Today wasn't just another step, it was a culmination. Her thoughts drifted to the past months, the tense moments aboard Flight 273, the hearings, the reforms. Every step had been hard fought. Marcus entered, his presence steadying. He carried his own mug. "Fuel for the big day," he said warmly. "Thanks," she replied, smiling, "though I'm not sure coffee can help with this kind of pressure." He chuckled. "Pressure is what makes the big moments memorable." They stood in comfortable silence. "You've come a long way, Olivia," Marcus said reflectively. "We've come a long way, but today it's your voice that will carry us forward." Olivia met his gaze. "Then let's make it count," she said softly. As the morning unfolded, the conference hall filled with energy. The stage bore a banner, "Inclusion Beyond Boundaries." Marcus took the stage. "We've always strived for excellence," he began. "But true excellence isn't just about efficiency, it's about the values we embody." He recounted key moments, highlighting personal stories. He didn't shy away from challenges, his words resonated deeply. When he introduced Olivia, the room erupted in applause. She walked to the podium. "When I think back to the day I boarded Flight 273, she began, "I never could have imagined standing here today. That day was painful, yes, but it also revealed something powerful, the strength that comes from confronting hard truths." Her gaze swept the room, pausing on Rebecca. "Our journey has been about more than fixing mistakes. It's been about committing to a vision where dignity and respect are foundational." She recounted stories of transformation. "But our work isn't done," she continued. "This summit is just the beginning. Together we have the opportunity to create an industry where inclusion is the standard, and that starts with each of us." Her words were met with a standing ovation. Later, Rebecca approached Olivia. "I wanted to say thank you," she began, "not just for the second chance, but for showing me what accountability really means." Olivia smiled. "You're the one who did the work, Rebecca. Change starts with a choice." "I won't stop," Rebecca said. "Neither will I," Olivia replied. As the summit concluded, Marcus returned to the stage. Today, I'm proud to introduce the Inclusion Beyond Boundaries framework, a cross-industry initiative to set new standards. I invite every company here to join us. The applause was deafening, a reflection of the hope and momentum. The summit had been a success. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "You're ready," he said simply. Olivia turned to him. "Ready for what?" "To take the lead," he replied, pride in his voice. "I'm stepping back soon. It's your time now." The weight of his words settled over her, but instead of fear, she felt certainty. "Then let's make it count," she said. As they walked out of the hall, the setting sun painted the horizon in hues of gold and orange. For Olivia, the journey ahead was clear. It wouldn't be easy, but it was worth every step. Olivia and Marcus walked out of the conference hall. Their departure wasn't an end. It marked the start of Olivia's new journey. The torch had been passed. Their story reminds us that change begins with courageous decisions and unwavering commitment. Thank you so much for watching and supporting Story Karma. Your engagement, whether it's watching, liking, commenting, or sharing, helps us continue bringing you powerful stories of crime, justice, and karma. We truly appreciate each and every one of you for being part of this journey. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Your support keeps this channel going, and we can't wait to share more incredible stories with you. All stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. We advocate for a world where everyone has equal rights under the law, and where society continues to grow in fairness, development, and civilization. Our goal is to share heartwarming stories that contribute to making life better. Any resemblance to real events, individuals, or organizations is purely coincidental and unintentional. These stories are not meant to reference any actual people, events, or entities, and contain no political or religious connotations.